Hello and welcome everyone. And thank you so much for attending tonight's event. We're really excited to have our guest, Dr. Asha Bauer, join us to talk about goal setting during these super uncertain times or times like this. And I think we're all probably experiencing it right now. But before we start, I do want to introduce ourselves and our organization, particularly for those who are joining us for the first time. So my name is Mila Kogan, and I'm the co-founder and organizer of GlobalUXD. And we also have Alex Strozzi here, who's our other co-founder and organizer. And we're an interdisciplinary community with chapters that are national. We also have international chapters, and hopefully we'll be growing even more. And while we're essentially called global user experience designers, we're really focused on enhancing the value and deepening the impact of design thinking as a philosophy, and creativity and innovation, as well as applications of personal and professional development, hence this talk. And the way that we do this is often through talks like this, but also panels. We do workshops, also different kinds of challenges, and hopefully for 2021, we'll be doing even more if this goal setting goes according to plan. So hopefully we'll be doing a lot more things. And also before I hand it off to Asha, I wanted to note that our chat is disabled, but during this whole talk, you can input your questions through the Q&A feature that's in Zoom. And I and Alex will try to take as many questions as we can during it. But we've also left some time after the presentation/workshop to answer any of your questions. But if we don't get to it, we do have a Slack channel, and you're welcome to join it and continue the conversation. Reach out to us if you want to. And if you're not part of the Slack channel, I'm not sure if we have this on every one of our chapter meetup pages, but for sure we have it on our San Francisco UXD meetup page in the About section. We should have invites. So if you click in there, you should be able to get right in there. So, and if you have any questions, reach out to me, Mila. So I think that's about it. And without much further ado, I'd love to introduce Asha with tonight's presentation. Thanks, Asha.
Thank you. Well, hello to everyone who's here tonight. We are going to talk about something that might create anxiety, might create excitement, maybe a little bit of both, but it's an unusual time to be thinking about the new year, and so really wanted to bring a different angle to it. I'll start by just telling you a little bit about myself, and interestingly enough, the tie-in to this is that I believe I met Mila in 2020, right before the world went under, and it was one of those the in-person events. I think maybe the last one before everything became remote. So it's just really nice to be here in a virtual format with everyone. So I am a psychologist by training, as well as a coach, and also at times a UX researcher. At times I'm a consultant to businesses. And so I am definitely someone who wears a lot of hats and like it that way, bringing a lot of complexity to the angles I look at, systems, and usually in the context of business, but tonight we'll be talking about systems in the context of yourself. And just in terms of things I currently am enjoying in my life, I'm the director of clinical care for a company called BetterUp. I also sit on a board of advisors for a company called Herd, and just enjoy living in Silicon Valley. I live in Oakland, California. And I'm going to walk everyone through just some thoughts, and I want this to be interactive tonight. I really don't think that this topic lends well to like a purely didactic format. And so I wish I could see you all. But since I can't, I just want to say that if you do have a piece of paper, a notepad, a Word document or a Google Doc that you can open up, you might benefit from that tonight, because ideally we're going to make this something that you actually make yourself the design problem, and look at how you can bring concepts that you may be familiar with or may not be familiar with from design thinking, as well as concepts that come from behavioral science, and merge them together to help you to set goals effectively, even when the world is completely unknown and the future is completely unknown. So I am also going to let you know that I will use Mila at times as an example of this, but I would love for you to interact with us as well by putting responses in the chat. So I'll give you some cues as we go, periods of time where it might be helpful to kind of chime in. And so hopefully we can create some interactive moments throughout this. I'm going to attempt to share my slides just to give you all something to look at. Second, show me. Okay. Mia, can you let me know if this is showing up okay?
It's showing up. It's just not in presentation mode, but
yeah,
you can see it.
it's a PDF, so that's why it's not in presentation mode. If it's coming in all right, if it's large enough, then I'll just go from there.
Yeah, I think it should be fine.
Okay. So apologies, it's not in presentation mode, but we're going to talk about 2021 today. So I just wanted to pause to give everyone a moment to think about the fact that we likely had a different plan for 2020 than what unfolded. None of us really could have anticipated what happened last year. And really saying like we made it, I've found that to be an emotionally complicated thing to say, because it doesn't actually feel very different, right? We rolled into 2021 and things are still very uncertain. We still don't know what to expect in the year ahead. We don't know what will happen next. And so I want to just take a moment to first honor that things didn't go as planned for any of us, and really have everyone take a moment to think about if you had set goals for yourself, professionally or personally in 2020 that were disrupted or put on hold entirely, or you had to change course suddenly because of the pandemic, because of the uprisings that occurred in many places, especially in the United States, and just the collective stress that went on. And just thinking through how that impacts the way you look to planning in 2021. Acknowledging your emotions here is really important, and acknowledging places that feel even a bit of resistance to the idea of planning or setting goals at all. Do you feel hesitance around setting goals, or anxiety even around setting goals in the year ahead? Maybe even an unwillingness, like a sense of there's no point in setting goals because if I set goals, then I'm just going to miss the mark again. So just kind of taking a second to think through if that's the case. And Mia, I will pull you in here. So let me go ahead and I'm going to be on and off with the sharing. What came up for you around 2020 with your goals? Did you feel like things shifted or stayed on the mark?
Oh, absolutely stayed on the mark. No, I would say, especially this is my passion project that I work on, is GlobalUXD. And it shifted 1 year, 1 year. Like my roadmap for last year is now my roadmap for this year.
Yeah.
So, and with that, a lot of, maybe for better or worse, new things pop up too, both personally and, with this particular goal that I have.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you notice any emotion come up around setting goals, given the fact that everything got delayed last year?
It's funny because, and I mentioned to this way earlier, but a big reason why I wanted to do this topic was I'm a huge goal setting, planning type of person. And every year, every December, I look forward to, and I have a specific notebook that's for setting and creating systems and feedback, whatever loops that I need. And I was like, screw that. I didn't even, it's not even that, I didn't even think to do it, right?
Yeah.
I was so not, I wasn't even in the mind frame to be planning in the way that I had been in the past. So yeah.
Yeah. And then just, I know we had spoken about that before, and I just wanted to kind of have that as a group validation, because I imagine what you're saying resonates with so many people who are listening to this, that sense of it just not feeling within the realm of, it doesn't even feel natural right now to go to set goals, right? It can feel very difficult. And yet, and this is where we're all going to become designers today, uncertainty is actually always the case in life, and certainly always the case in design. And actually, constraints are part of the design process. So if we think about how design process works, usually there is some sort of obstacle or something that actually creates challenge, and that is part of the process. And there's also things that break along the way and things that we didn't expect. And right, so we see this happen throughout, if we're thinking about product design, or if we're thinking about other forms of design. And I feel like 2020 was just a macro version of that, in a way, where we saw so much of this. And so now that we've kind of gone through the collective, I think the heaviest emotional part of it, we can start to look at this as a design problem, right? That we're in 2021, very uncertain. We don't know how long things will last, and we don't know what it will look like. So I just wanted to start with that, to say this is hard, right? And this whole talk should come with a caveat that emotional resources are a thing that wax and wane. And so, of course, you take care of yourself, and on the days where goal setting is not a thing, just, that's the day that you take a bath or go for a walk, right? And so at the same time, when your resources feel like they are there, I want to just put out the idea that maybe we could still set goals this year, but we might think about them a little bit differently. So I want to talk about intentions versus metrics, and how both of them can come into play when it comes to setting goals when things are uncertain. So maybe even if you have some resistance to it, maybe you didn't set any goals, maybe you did set goals. Maybe if everyone can think of just one goal, metric-based goal, that they have in 2021, even if you're scared to say it out loud, right? And this can be personal or professional. A professional goal might be to get a new job, or get a promotion, or finish your portfolio that you're revamping. A personal goal could be around travel, or something that feels unrealistic right now, or something like you're wanting to take up a new sport or a new hobby, right? So there's lots of different goals that we often set at the start of the year. So if everyone can just think for 1 minute around what a metric-based goal would be. And even if it feels scary to put it down, you might even write it down. And I'll give you an example from my own life in a second. So the metric-based goal is the goal that causes anxiety right now. And underneath every metric-based goal is an intention. An intention is something much more flexible. Intention is what allows us to flex when things change, when there are new constraints. So I'm going to give you an example from my own life in 2020, just to walk you through what this could look like. I had a goal in January of 2020 of doing a lot more travel. So specifically, I did have a bucket list item I was hoping to get to go to Japan. I've never been to Japan before. And so that's very metrics based, right? Saving up the right amount of money, creating an itinerary, buying tickets. There's a lot of things that are involved in doing that. Obviously, this goal did not happen, right? So from that standpoint, I guess I did not meet my goal. But underneath the goal was an intention. And the intention, if I really sit with my heart and like what was the intention behind it, was to explore the world and to dive deeper into other cultures, right? That was my deeper intention. So I want you to think about the metric-based goal you might have in 2021, whether that's a personal goal or a professional goal that you're kind of playing with for this workshop. And think about what is the deeper intention to it? What is the deep down, the reason why this feels like it matters to you? Or the broader thing that you're wanting to do, right? And I'm going to use love for an example. So do you care to share something professional coming up or personal coming up and
Yeah,
metric-based and intention-based?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the biggest one that I would say was a huge goal for last year, and that was a huge goal for this year. That's metric-based is, and a little wink to everyone, which is GlobalUXD is going through an incorporation and a rebrand, and kind of getting to that next level of as an organization that we've been wanting to for even years. But that was the big one professionally. So I would say that as a metric based.
Yeah, definitely a metric based, right? Because that's sort of, there are milestones that you can actually measure to see if you're kind of meeting the mark in that, in terms of like incorporating. It's very metric based. You'll know when you succeed at a metric level with that. But if you dig a little deeper underneath it, what is the intention behind GlobalUXD for you?
I mean, for me, it is a completely new chapter in my career. So I am a UX designer by trade. That's what I do for my day job. But this was something that I've been wanting. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of fulfilling a passion and a next level step in my career.
Yeah, you're expanding your career, and I would say also something like incorporating is taking something to a next level in terms of its reach and its impact, right? Like there's so much possibility in that. And so that spreading, creating something bigger, right? And following your passion to do that. And that's the interesting thing, because if you have the intention underneath it, I would argue that you have definitely in 2020 met that intention, because the pivot, the pivot that was needed to turn towards making remote events, kind of keeping things going strong in a time that's very uncertain, and actually making that happen, where it didn't always happen, right? Like not everyone was able to kind of navigate that, and some communities fell away entirely during 2020, right? And so that actually is kind of in line with that. And having both those mindsets will help when things that are uncertain happen, right? Because then we can say, okay, let me go to the deeper intention underneath this and see what I can get from that to help me kind of create a design-like pivot in this, given the new constraints, right? So the example I was giving before about Japan, yes, from a metric-based perspective, I did not meet my goal in 2020, right? There were new constraints on the scene as of March, and that prevented that from happening. And yet, there are so many other things that you could do that would still be in line with that exploring the world and diving into deeper into other cultures. There were events happening online where you could virtually tour other places, including places in Japan. There are things like people got really into Duolingo, and they were learning other languages in preparation for traveling after the pandemic. There were people who were off opening up their museums and their community centers virtually so that you could tour them as if you were there. And of course, there was the opportunity to budget at a finer level in order to be able to kind of have a fuller experience on the other side of everything. And all of these are still in line with the goal of, creating opportunity for exploration and diving deeper into other cultures. And so from an intention standpoint, there's still a pivot that can happen, right? To kind of stay in line with what your goals are without it feeling like there is a a binary decision between success and failure. And that's actually really, really key here, is that if we think about design thinking in general, failure is a concept that's seen differently from a design thinking lens. And this is true in behavioral science as well, right? That there's a concept of maybe failing forward, or a growth mindset, essentially, an iteration, kind of looking at things as opportunities instead of as successes or failures along the way. And so really kind of taking a moment to think about your mindset around a goal that you set that maybe you're kind of falling off on. I think a great one that came up for a lot of people during the pandemic and during 2020 was around kind of career pivots, right? So people were refreshing their portfolio. I know I was refreshing my portfolio at the beginning of 2020. So that was something I was heavily working on. And that perspective of like how difficult it was to find new opportunities during that time, how difficult it was to make pivots during that time. If we looked at it only from the metrics angle, we would just be kind of plowing forward and then seeing no other path. So it's not creative, right? So an other way of thinking about this is, how can I look at the new constraints as design constraints instead of roadblocks? So if something hits this year that we don't even know is going to hit, because who knows, right? Because everything is always uncertain. How can I greet that as a constraint that actually challenges me to think more creatively, rather than as a roadblock that prevents me from moving towards my goal? That shift alone into actually bringing design thinking into your personal life can be incredibly game changing, but very hard to do, right? It's hard to remind ourselves that we can actually treat our life like a design problem. A couple questions that are really key in growth mindset work, and if everyone's familiar or not familiar with the growth mindset, I'll just give you a quick primer on it. Growth mindset is a concept that was originally studied by a psychologist named Carol Dweck, who studied essentially two mindsets that tend to develop in children at a young age. And it's very aligned for me with design thinking, because it's sort of thinking flexibly about things versus thinking rigidly about things, right? Designers and people who use design thinking in their daily life are thinking flexibly about things. And so she found that children, when they were young, would either look at difficult math problems and like kind of get excited and say, "Ooh, you gave me a challenging one. I don't quite know how to do this one. I'm so excited to try to figure this out." While other children would look at those difficult problems and say, "I'm just so too dumb for this. This doesn't, like, I can't do it," and kind of throw down the pencil and not try. So she called these a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, greeting challenge with the excitement to grow and learn and experience through the challenge, versus fixed, meaning that if something is not working out, it means something is wrong with you, that you have failed, or that something is wrong with the world and the world has failed, right? So that sort of rigid thinking about things. So I'd really encourage everyone to practice growth mindset. And we'll talk today a little bit about different ways you can practice growth mindset in your daily life. I think it is a key practice to start thinking about how often you ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? Rather than, why did I fail? Or why did this fail? And that small pivot can be incredibly eye-opening, because you start to see things as learning opportunities instead of as failures. The other thing to ask is, who can help me, right? Kind of who can help support me in this situation? Who can help brainstorm with me in this situation? Because I think we often treat the personal goals we're going through as somehow siloed, while we know most great design happens collaboratively, right? So if we know that that is true, that most creativity happens through collaboration, then that also applies to your personal goals in your life, right? So that piece around thinking through, how do I find that support and find that accountability, is really key here. So I'm going to pause here and think through what that applied for me with Japan, right? What can I learn from this experience? I can learn just how much this matters to me moving forward, absolutely. But I can also learn that there are so many ways to connect with people deeply if I bring intention to it. And there are so many ways to experience the world that I hadn't even considered before, right? If we think about the process of incorporating, the amount that you will learn and grow from that process is just incredible, right? There's so much learning about business, about how businesses are formed. That entire process really, really grows you as a person, and it cultivates whole new qualities, and character traits that you wouldn't have the opportunity to grow from without going through that process, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Go ahead.
We do have a question that I think is relevant to what you were saying about having people finding the resources and having people help you.
Yeah.
Someone asked here, what if you can't find someone to help you? How do you navigate and find anyone who can help you in those sort of situations?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the question here, again, like, how could we pivot that to a growth mindset wording, right? What if you can't find someone to help? In design thinking, we often use how might we statements, right? So how might I find someone to help, right? Is sort of a different kind of pivot on that, which then you can kind of think around, well, how might I find support around this situation? So given what the situation is, that will depend on that, right? So with the travel, I might join some travel related clubs and groups, right, where I can discuss with people. I might join, and actually, did join a group where I was able to ask budget related questions for budgeting for travel to help me kind of on that end. How might I questions are really, really useful here. So I think, was a how might I get support around business building questions? Do you have any that come up for you around that?
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in my case, I mean, luckily I also have Alex, so I do have a partner, but when,
Yep.
He's also busy with work, and when we can't get to the bottom of certain things, it's really about getting creative. In my case, really getting creative and stripping down any ego or any, you can't be scared, and you kind of have to learn that. And maybe this is part of the failing forward thing, is being somewhat comfortable with the idea of making what you think might be mistakes when they're not, or they might not be, and they're really just these opportunities of growth in one way or the other, whether it's getting to the bottom of your question or it's learning how to draft an email the next time, don't say this kind of thing. So in any case, I think sort of being positive. I think I'm going on a little bit of a tangent from you.
No, it's super helpful. And I think it's also groups like this are great places for support, right? So there's community where I think oftentimes it's sort of how might I, questions often require courage, right?
Yeah. Or how might I want to? Do you think that would be a good way of getting outside of yourselves and getting outside of those fears, if it is fear-based?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think if I think about accountability, right, and support and getting that encouragement, one of the things that came up for me early on when I was starting to branch out from traditional research into UX research and going out into that field, I was humbled, right, by how in some ways I knew all of these methodologies, and in other ways I didn't know this world, right? And so how might I get the support I need? Branched out into what networks can I join? What people can I awkwardly reach out to on LinkedIn and set up coffee chats with, which I did many, many, many times. How many times can I, get in the room with certain people virtually or otherwise, where I can ask, questions and get more feedback and answers beyond Google, right? Because ultimately what that did was lead to a series of mentors that did not come immediately, but came through the iterations of kind of seeking support in different ways and in different places and those mentors were able to support me at a much higher level to kind of go to whatever my next step was, right? And so that question is really interesting. Like, how might I, work on my courage, right? Might be another how might we kind of statement that comes out of it.
Unintentionally, you'll end up like working on another goal without knowing that you needed it or wanted it. So
Exactly. And that's why the intentions versus metrics is so key, because ultimately we are working towards our goals in this global fashion then, right? We're kind of working towards our personal and professional development by asking these strategic questions. And yes, we work towards them systematically. I'm not saying to throw out metrics altogether. I think metrics are beautiful. Having milestones are beautiful. And ultimately, what we're doing is kind of growing as a person. We're cultivating ourselves. And so that question is really beautiful. So I want to thank whoever asked that, because I think it's a difficult question to ask around, like, I don't feel like I have the support right now, and it can feel really scary. So I want to validate that and encourage you to kind of ask those how might I questions that kind of help you step outside of it. So we've covered growth mindset. I do want to ask if there are any questions around growth mindset. We can definitely pause for that.
Yeah, I was going to say there is another one. I wasn't sure if you wanted to go forward, but we could go into this question, which is regarding the growth mindset. I'm concerned that even though we may think of failure as learning experiences, especially in the workplace or in business, bosses and investors are judging us by success, failure, and competency. Therefore, there is always a cost to failure, i.e. bad reviews, losing your job, losing a client or investor. How does someone with a growth mindset reconcile that in their mind? That is a good
question. That is a juicy question. And it's so true. Let's go back to Carol Dweck's research, which originated with students, right? These students actually were, facing potential consequences for not doing their math homework, right? Like there was a real metric on the line, their grades. So grades are metric based in our current society and world. But here is what she actually found. The children that, and again, she's applied this since this is her original research on children, this applies to adults fully. But in that initial experiments that she was running, the children who had the growth mindset actually persevered longer and were willing to put in more effort because it wasn't as draining, and because they believed that they could grow and they believed that they could get better. So they saw themselves as not static and not permanently fixed in one place, one level of intelligence, one level of ability. And because of that, they were more energized by the opportunity to grow and change. So they actually, over time, show to have higher scores, to actually succeed more on the metrics level, because they don't see a failure as defining them or defining their future. And so in this kind of paradoxical way, we actually are more likely to reach our metric-based goals by having that flexible mindset here in the moment. It feels very counterintuitive though. So I just want to honor that. Like, it does not feel, when you're saying like, oh, I'll just treat a failure as an opportunity. That's not to say that we don't learn from failure, right? That wouldn't be growth mindset. That would be bypassing, right? So we don't want to say that, like, oh, I'm stressed, it's a pandemic. So I mean, all bets are off here. But rather to kind of think about how can I actively learn from this and iterate on it? And we'll get to feedback cycles in a second, because that's the other piece of it. We must put into application what we learn, right? So yes, there are real stakeholders on the line. There are metrics that need to be taken care of, and that's why we don't want to throw them out altogether. But this mindset will make you feel more energized, because you won't feel like you as a person are on the line, because really worth gets tied into a lot of work, right? Like worth and work are actually really intricately tied, and that could be a whole different topic that I won't dive down the rabbit hole of right now. But if you're feeling like my worth as an employee, for instance, is tied to if I meet this metric, it's really going to impact your energy to be moving forward when things kind of get rough, right? Because when things go wrong, there's going to be a sense of I screwed up. Everyone sees me as screw up. I see myself as a screw up, right? And there's not going to be that, what can I learn from this? How can I get even better? That energizes you to make some changes. That's a great question. So thank you for that. So let's talk about feedback cycles. So feedback cycles are basically the thing that differentiates all of you after you leave tonight and most people setting New Year's resolutions, not just this year, but literally every year. I don't have the statistics right in front of me, but they're dismal. And I know we don't even need those statistics because we all know that New Year's resolutions tend to fail. And the reason for that is that we don't have feedback cycles, right? So imagine from a design perspective, if you had a particular goal and you were going to work towards that, a particular deliverable, and you had no feedback cycle in place to look at what happened and to build and grow from it, right? That would prevent you from actually iterating on the process, from prototyping, from then kind of looking, from gaining feedback, and then from going back and making an improved design moving forward in the next iteration. So we often don't apply feedback cycles to ourselves. So you might think for yourself right now, with the goal that you're working on here tonight, what would be a useful feedback cycle for me? I will say that my feedback cycles have gotten more frequent in my own life as life becomes more uncertain. So I, before the pandemic, set quarterly feedback cycles for myself. And if I set goals, personal and professional goals at the beginning of the year, I would check once a quarter to see how I was doing. Now, sometimes I'm doing that weekly, but definitely monthly. I'm sitting down and looking at how am I doing on my goals? Where am I at? Where am I growing? What can I learn from what's not going well? Because when things are uncertain, they're changing too quickly, I feel like, for quarters. So you might set them weekly too. You might actually create a process. I actually have some consulting clients that do set weekly retrospectives, right? Kind of part of their process to kind of look at what's going well and what's not. So thinking for yourself, how will I actually go back and create a feedback cycle for myself? And you can formalize this if it feels useful to do that, and bring the same level of care to it, because that will help you with practicing growth mindset on a weekly basis or a monthly basis as well. Mila, what do you think about feedback cycles? Where do you put them into your own life?
Well, we do have a question on clarifying feedback cycles before we go a little bit further of like or feedback loops, I believe, are synonymous.
Yeah, feedback loops, yeah.
If you want to go into sort of clarifying and defining it a little bit.
Yeah, what a feedback loop is, or a feedback cycle. Yeah. So this is a period of time where you've worked for a period of time on something, and then you sit down and you get feedback, essentially. So if you're using a goal for yourself, you're getting feedback from yourself. If you have accountability partners or support or a team or a partner, if it's a couple goal, then that is also someone involved in the feedback loop. So this is gaining that information. So if you're working with just yourself, and often many of my goals, I'm working mostly with myself, although I have other people that I will draw their feedback in. I will actually be asking kind of about both the metrics, but also the qualitative. How am I feeling? What's coming up for me here? Where do I need to iterate and pivot? Right. So I'm asking those questions and really kind of taking a look at what's happened so far so that I can kind of decide what to do in moving forward. So it's quite broad because you can apply it however you will, depending on what your goal is. We do this in the workplace all the time, right? We sit down and we talk about, how did this go? How do we want to make this better the next time? We just so often leave this out with ourselves. I mean, I can't even imagine if this was our habit to do stuff like this. If someone had a goal of going to the gym more, obviously they're not right now, the home gym, and just if they actually had a loop in place to kind of follow up with their trainer or their partner and themselves and kind of get that feedback, how much that would benefit them in continuing to go to the gym and continuing to get that workout in. Unfortunately, we tend to kind of set it as, I'm just going to go every day. And we don't set any point to check in about what's working and what's not working. And so that sort of circular way of viewing progress instead of linear. Does that help?
I think so. It was
Okay.
I,
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But yeah, to answer your question, I mean, a big thing that I started delving in last year is the idea of system thinking as an approach for your daily life
Right.
and your habits and your goals. And I think this is where feedback cycles are a really big part of that, is finding a way of, even if you have a daily planner and you have every Sunday, you want to have a little reflection time on how did the things that I wanted to do go? Uh, did I, and it's more than just like, did I achieve them or did I not achieve them? Right.
Exactly, because you're also weaving in those growth mindset questions, right? So
Exactly.
it's did I meet the goals? Yes or no? Sure. And then, if yes, how?
Yeah.
If no, what can I learn from this,
Right.
right? So you're adding that kind of qualitative component of being a proper mixed methods researcher myself. I tend to want to do both, right? Like, see, where am I at, but also like what can I learn from this, and doing that also when things go well, right? Like if you
Yeah.
are hitting the mark with going back to the gym, what's helping me do that? Is it because I'm packing my gym bag every night before, right? Like
Yeah.
that's useful to know. Then that's good data.
Right.
um Same in the other direction. Why am I not going? Like, like I don't eat a snack and then I'm really hungry after I finish working, right? Like that's good data, right? And so if we think about it that way, we're continuously learning on that weekly or monthly basis about how we can improve. And if you can bring someone into this, even better. Again, like the more you can bring other people into this process, the better. I have several goals in my life that I bring in my partner on a regular basis to. He tolerates my design thinking brain with like, let's sit down to a monthly retrospective on how nutrition is going and productivity, and me taking that walking break at noon that I always say I'm going to take. These are all kind of things that I'm working on, and it really helps to have that other person in the feedback cycle.
And do
Yeah.
you feel also like, as part of the feedback cycle, or maybe it's part of a bigger thing of constantly going back to your why or going back to your intentionality, and either checking it off like, oh, it's really matching, or something's wrong. I've changed, my environment's changed.
Yeah.
Maybe my intentionality is different, or my intentions to begin with, or something, or is it?
Yeah. I intentions can change. I think it's a little bit more rare. They're so
Yeah.
tied to our values, but our metrics might change, right?
Right.
Like in the way in which we want to bring about whatever we're wanting to bring about can change. So um that can be because of external circumstances or internal, right?
Right.
So for example, if someone is seeking a new job opportunity and they want to be in, let's say they want to be in a UX designer, and they're looking for opportunities and things aren't working out. And their deeper thing is they're wanting to really help with the user experience within companies. And then, maybe a usability testing opportunity comes in, or, it's something that's not quite it. Then they can actually look at, do I want to actually shift the metric goal here? Or maybe they have an opportunity to become a consultant and freelance, but it still fits with that intention of like really kind of helping with the user experience within a certain field or whatever that goal is. The intention behind it is still the same, right? So those pivots can be really helpful. And I think the retrospectives, if you do them regularly, the really helpful thing about this is that you can have that mindfulness to know, am I pivoting or am I tweaking and refining? Right. And that, does this call for a pivot altogether? Do I need to kind of throw this out and we'll do something new? Or do I need to tweak and refine and iterate this process? If we're not checking in with ourselves, we won't have a way of knowing that. So yeah, I think it's a great kind of decision point. I think this is a great place to open for if there are other kind of things coming up along the way.
Yeah, there was a question on sticking to my goals, and I
Yeah.
think feedback loops are a little bit part of that. But so the person says, I have a hard time sticking to my goals. Can you tell me what might be wrong? How can I set goals and stick to them to the end I have a lot of goals, which I think is the problem, and not enough time.
Yeah, that sounds like definitely potentially part of the problem. Well, I would encourage you to first do the intention practice for each one of your goals, right? Because it might help you a bit with just creating some more clarity. I think sometimes we set a lot of arbitrary goals, but we don't have a deep connection to them necessarily. And it'll be hard to feel motivated to stick to something that you don't have a deep connection to at that deeper intention level. So I would encourage you to do that. Also, the idea of working on multiple goals at the same time. I mean, technically, we're always working on multiple goals at the same time. However, I mean, most productivity research has shown that having focused tasks and things that you hone in on as your focus goal is more useful than trying to, jump between goals all of the time. The good news is there's something called the halo effect is a thing. So when you start working on one thing, it does create motivation across the board. And so you might consider creating a focus goal for just the month and just have that be the focus and see what it's like to focus in on just one thing or just one or two things at a time. You might find that you actually naturally start working on all the other goals as well, or that some of them just don't have the importance you thought that they had. So that's the first things that come to mind there.
Another question that we have is ideas on when it may be appropriate to reassess a goal. For example, I aim to get up earlier in the morning, but at some point it becomes a source of bitterness because I often do not meet this goal. Have the goal perhaps move 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., for example?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I love this. That this is one that I've gone through many iterations of. And this is what iteration is, right? So iteration is taking a broader concept, which is I want to get up earlier in the morning and having a deep intention for it, because I want to mindfully enter my day, because I care about prioritizing my self-care before work or whatever the reason is for that goal, right? And then iterating on it, right? Like I'm going to try kind of doing it all at once. Maybe I used to be waking up at 9 and now I'm going to wake up at 6, and that doesn't work. And it doesn't feel good, and it's creating stress in yourself. And then you iterate on it. Like maybe I'll try rolling it back 15 minutes at a time until I feel like I'm at a place and I'll keep seeing how I feel each morning. And when I'm at the time that feels like that balance between having enough time in the morning versus it, feeling too extreme and I can't actually properly wake up. Right. Maybe I'll need to iterate on my nighttime routine, and I'll realize that's actually getting in the way. Right. So that's what iteration is versus like making one drastic goal to wake up at 5 a.m. And that's the binary success or failure. So I hope that helps to kind of see it more flexibly like that. It's more, there's a broad thing. How might I wake up earlier in the morning to have, a morning routine before I start working? And then, oh my goodness, how many ways branch out from that, right? So many options for doing that. So.
Do you feel like with that, and I feel like the question before kind of lays on this also, is it really does go back to the intention, where too often we'll set these goals and Tim Ferriss told me to do it, or whoever, so I'm going to do it because that's what makes me successful, instead of it really connecting to that deeper. And what I do, and I don't know if you would suggest this, is not just asking myself what's my intention, but asking it like 5 times. But why? Yes. But why?
Yeah. And that's a design skill too.
Totally,
To keep asking to do the 5 whys, but do it on yourself, right? Like, why does this matter? Why does this matter? And get really deep into that understanding.
And so maybe you don't want to wake up at 6 a.m. Like maybe it doesn't fit what you need to do with your life, or the reasoning why you think you should, or something. And I'm not making any
well, encouraging people to not should on themselves, if you will, right? Like
right.
that's
yeah. And that's what I do with myself a lot of times. It's like, well, why am I really doing this? Why do I think I want to do this? And then those adjustments that I start making with those feedback loops will allow me to really find a good place for me right now where I am in this moment,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. there's taking all of this as an iteration process is such a beautiful way of growing towards your goals flexibly. Like you might start working on a morning routine goal, for instance, and realize that deep down, this is not giving you that intention, but a beautiful evening routine or that midday walk would, right? So there's those things you're going to learn by collecting the data. And this is why I'm an advocate for user research, right? Like we do design without actually talking to the users about what their experience is of it. In this case, you're the user, right? So like do your user research and just pay attention and kind of look at that. I wanted to just, I know we'll have a couple other questions. I want to drop a couple quick tips because I know if people head off towards the end. One thing that cultivates resilience during uncertain times is to create a practice of appreciation and celebration. And I want to say appreciation instead of gratitude, because I think a gratitude practice is beautiful, but a gratitude practice is often external. I'm grateful for my kids. I'm grateful for my dog. I'm grateful that the sun is out today, right? Grateful I have food on the table. An appreciation practice is being appreciative of yourself and the things you did well each day. And so that's part of this as well, is with this whole process, what am I appreciative of in myself? And that can be character qualities or things I did well this week to help me move towards my goals, or even the fact that I'm sitting down to this darn retrospective, even if I can't come up with anything else, like that's something you appreciate in yourself. Research shows that if people who write down 3 positive things that happened each day see a slew of benefits across the board in their life just from creating that one simple habit. And so I think just from a behavioral science standpoint too, just noticing that the practice of internalizing growth mindset is creating that appreciation every single day. So I just wanted to drop that as just a way of, thinking about this in a less analytical way, because I could see, even in the person's comment earlier around goals, like how can I not make it towards my goals? And I think practicing appreciation around your efforts towards your goals will actually kind of shift that mindset to that more growth oriented mindset. And that can be really helpful with perseverance and resilience. So
that's very beautiful and beneficial. I think we all need, especially myself, a little reminder to do that.
Yeah, for anyone who keeps a gratitude practice too, you might just notice like how often are these external, right? And not internal things I appreciate about myself, right? I think that internal process we leave out often, which will prevent us from seeing ourselves as kind of agents in our lives and having that sense of internal locus of control is the word for it, seeing yourself as the agent of change in your life. Just a powerful practice. So something I want to offer everyone.
Absolutely. We have a couple of minutes, but I do want to we have 3 questions, so I do want to get to these. So we have, Sarah says, do you have any time blocking tips or methods that can help you achieve flow? I've heard this spoken about as the magic state for work and wondering what your thoughts are.
I love talking about flow. That's a deep concept, so we won't get too much into flow psychology. I love talking about flow though. And I'm going to say something frustrating to this, which is that there's no one right way to practice flow or fall into flow. So I could just like word vomit different productivity methods and time blocking methods, but they might not work for you. And so I think bringing this process in again it might be really beneficial, whether that's practicing different types of time blocking, like Pomodoro technique. There's a lot of different techniques out there that you could try, but really paying attention to how you felt after each time. Because I know people that time blocking does it for them. And I know others that's actually not their best way. They're much more sensory and they need to create environmental cues to find their flow, or a clean workspace is the thing that works for them. And so really iterating on that's super important. So I'll leave it broad, and I know that that's a frustrating answer. I apologize.
That's a very UX answer. Okay, another question. Can you share a good goal and when and how to measure it?
Oh, I can't say what a good goal is for you because I'm not you. But I think, it's like any sort of design question, not too broad, not too specific, right? So And the how might I language can actually be useful because it makes it playful and creative rather than like, thou shalt get a job by March, like that's too, it's too prescriptive and too rigid, right? So just bringing that and then measuring it, retrospective, I think measuring success is a matter of kind of looking both at, the actual words on the page, if you will, like what is the actual metric here, but then also the qualitative, I think asking yourself, how am I feeling this week about this, and really checking in with your intention and how aligned you feel with it. Yeah, bringing the subjective in too.
Great, thanks. So our last question, is it normal to feel overwhelmed when trying to knock out smaller tasks that would help, that would help achieve my larger goal? How can I apply a growth mindset and to feel stressed slash overwhelmed while managing smaller tasks?
So I would feel your feelings, first of all. I mean, I don't think growth mindset means don't feel feelings. So I think validate the fact that you feel overwhelmed and ask what might I learn from this overwhelm, right? So you can actually use growth mindset towards your emotional experience as well. So I think rather than thinking of it as like, again, kind of going back to just how do I knock these tasks out and get this like gritty mindset so I can do that, you can also think, how might I approach this overwhelm in a different way that feels a bit more expansive and a bit more compassionate to myself, right? So there's other ways of approaching that problem. So again, think like a designer. What other problems are there in here that I might bring this? How might I? So I would actually encourage you to ask a question about the overwhelm itself, and see what you find there. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Asha. I think that's all our questions. And thank you so much for helping us through this January and hopefully many, many more months to come. And we'll all have these beautiful goals that change or don't change and help us become better, beautiful human beings. And thank you for joining us. And thank you everyone else who was able to join on this Tuesday evening. And hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Enjoy the journey, everyone. And yeah, just I'll be easy on yourself. We're all in this together. So.
Absolutely. All right, we'll sign off now.
All right,
Bye,
bye.
everyone.